Welcome to the Leafy Podcast, helping real estate investors and entrepreneurs grow. Say hello to your hosts, Jennifer Goglorick and Brian Price, founders of Leafy Legal Services, teaching you how to protect your assets, grow your business, and manage your wealth. Let's start the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leafy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Tammy, the podcast manager, and on the line with me, I have both of our wonderful hosts with us. We've got Brian Price and Jennifer Gligorich from Leafy Legal Services, and they have another awesome guest, so I will go ahead and pass it on to them today. Hey, Brian and Jennifer, how are you doing?
Great. So we have a very a distinguished guest today who has written, everybody, you've probably read something from him and you just don't know it yet. He is a contributor for HuffPo, Inc.com. He's got an ongoing beat with Forbes. He's a certified financial planner, certified financial transitionist, a chartered financial consultant, and chartered life underwriter. He's got decades worth of experience helping business owners think differently about money, to be able to put their lives and their businesses on track, but mostly to have a sustainable business. So we're talking with Josh Patrick with sustainablebusiness.com, and we're about to delve into how he got so he reads, and he also reads a book a week, and he has from college. So that's probably why he is such a great writer. But we're going to find out a lot more. Again, we're with Josh Patrick with sustainablebusiness.com. Hey, Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, except I have to make one correction. It's sustainablebusiness.co. .co. Yeah, there's a new abbreviation that came out a few years ago, and it confuses the heck out of people, but it's .co, not .com.
Okay, sustainablebusiness.co. Josh Patrick with that.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome, Josh. So, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and how you kind of got there, and then, I'm really interested to talk about, what makes a sustainable business as well. So, we'll probably dive pretty deep into that today.
Cool. Well, I was going to college, and I was in my senior year thinking about becoming a lawyer. And then I started looking at what lawyers actually did, said it's not for me. And I looked around, and there was a family business, which was the path of least resistance. I joined it. My father and I were like oil and water. He sent me up to a location a couple hours away to close it out. I picked up a few more accounts, and he said, I don't want to go there anymore, so you buy it from me. So at 24 years old, I bought a very small business. It was doing $75,000 a year. It had a part-time employee and me. And over the next 3 years, the worst thing that ever could happen to a 24-year-old new business owner happened to me. Would you like to know what that is? Right. You got it.
Yeah.
I was really, really, really successful. Yeah. And being 24 and having the hubris of a 24-year-old, I thought it was because of my brilliant skills. In fact, it was just blind luck. And then for the next 5 years, I got to have the other side of that wonderful success and had 5 years of some really hard learning. And along the way, realized I needed to learn how to run a business because I had a degree in American history, which doesn't do much for running a business. And then I went out and started learning all I could about what makes a business sustainable, and have been on that path for the last 40 years.
Wow, that's incredible. And you've managed to see 90 Grateful Dead concerts in all that time doing that.
Well, I think it's over 100 now.
Wow.
But actually half are real Dead concerts and half are what I call remnants of the Dead.
Oh, the cover bands.
Well, no, still have Grateful Dead members in them, but it's not the whole band.
Okay.
Like if you go see Dead and Company right now, Phil Lesh, the bass player, is not playing with them. So it's, and Jerry Garcia died in 95. So anything after 95 is remnants of the Dead.
Remnants of the Dead. See, I've learned a new term now. Now I'm going to say that in a conversation and feel like I'm being super cool.
Yeah, except I'm the only one that ever uses the term. So
I will help you trademark that.
And I definitely am not super cool.
Well, that's hilarious. So tell us about, so you write and you blog for the Times, and
I used to blog for the Times. They unfortunately shut down the You're the Boss section, which was the blog for small businesses a few years ago.
Oh, darn. Well,
and then I moved over to Forbes and I stopped doing that. Now I do actually video blogs every week on my own blog.
Oh, okay. So that's good.
Yep.
And then of course you're the host of the Business Sustainability Podcast, and that's
Yep.
sustainablebusiness.co. You got to go
Yes.
to that so you can listen to that, see how I got that in. So tell us a little bit about what is, when you have a term, mistake friendly company. So talk a little bit about that, because when you hear about mistakes, of course, most business owners, you think financial ruin, bankruptcy. I don't want to make mistakes. So tell me a little bit about your term and how you mean that.
Well, here's the truth. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we're either going to admit we make mistakes and learn from them, or pretend we didn't make mistakes and blame other people for the mistakes that happen around our lives. So if you're going to be successful in business, you better be personally responsible, which means you need to own the mistakes and own the successes you have, but more importantly, own the mistakes. There was an author from last century, actually a huge thinker, a guy named Buckminster Fuller. And Fuller had two things he said about mistakes. One is mistakes are learning opportunities, and you don't learn less. So if you can have that attitude towards mistakes, and when you make a mistake, instead of blaming somebody else or justifying why it wasn't your fault, pretend it is your fault, and then ask this very simple question to yourself: what did I learn? And stay with that until you get learning. Now, if you happen to own a business and you have employees and they make mistakes, and guess what? Your employees are going to make mistakes. And instead of calling them an idiot or yelling at them or all the stuff that many bosses do, I want you to do two things. First, I want to say, what can we change systematically so we can systematically get rid of that mistake so it becomes a system and not a person thing? And the second thing you need to do is you need to go to that person and say, what did you learn? And when they shrug their shoulders, say, I don't know, which is what happens when you first start doing this, then you have to say, well, if you did know, what would it be? And when they shrug their shoulders again, you have to say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pretend you know what you learned and tell me that. And that's what they actually learned. So when they tell you that, then you say, gee, do you think that might be something you learned from this? Now, the first time you do this with someone, they're going to think you're crazy. The second time they think you're going to do with it is they're going to say, what happened to this guy? Now, if you do it 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, 10 times, people are going to start understanding that making a mistake doesn't get them fired. It gets them having a conversation about what needs to change. And when we do that, you've developed a mistake-friendly company.
I like that, because that personal responsibility is hard to take for some people. They find it very difficult, as if by admitting they made a mistake at all, the earth will swallow up, they'll lose their job and everything will go. And so it's a very gentle way of saying, no, that's not how it really works. We've learned that there's a problem, and how can we avoid this problem? Because there's always a solution for everything. And when your solution's placed, it just makes things a lot easier, I think. I love it.
Well, in our food service company, I used to have 90 employees. That's what we ended up with from my one part-time person. And we had posters all over the company. And then we had the word responsibility in green, and then a blue line. And below it was lay blame and justify. And one of my core values for any company I'm ever involved with is personal responsibility. So we would say, is this above the line or below the line behavior when somebody was acting out? And if they were saying, they'd have to admit that it was below the line, because I wouldn't let them sit there and say it was above the line when it wasn't. And then I would say, okay, what do you need to change to get to be above the line? And they would tell me what they had to do. And we would stay with that until they got to be above the line. Now, every once in a while, we had some people that snuck into our company that couldn't ever get above the line, and they had to leave. But for the most part, when I had that conversation with people, they would say, oh, yeah, I get it. And they would tell me what they needed to do to be personally responsible. I said, great, go do it. Have fun.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's interesting.
So you can use, one of the 4 things that creates a sustainable business is having solid values. And values are not the thing you stick on a wall. They're a tool that you have to use every day. So you have to set them up in a way that they can be used.
Right. Absolutely. And when you develop this, or I don't know if it's something that you discovered on your own, or someone, you found this somewhere. Was this during your kind of the dark times, the 5 years you were talking about, or how did this kind of come to be?
Well, it sort of came about from that. I mean, I went from being the most unresponsible owner manager in the world to adopting what I call super responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And like becoming super responsible, I would pretend I was responsible for everything, even if I wasn't, because at least I could do something about that. If I'm saying I'm not responsible, there's nothing I can do about it, which means I'm living at, I'm not being able to control what goes around in my life.
Yeah, you're completely powerless to situations around you, and that's not a good feeling when you feel powerless at all. And people can spiral away very quickly when that happens. So when you had that conversation, did anyone ever say anything to you back as a staff that said, well, I'm burned out or something like that because my hours are this way, something that actually triggered a change for you as a manager when they responded back on the above the line or below the line question?
I actually don't think I had, well, I've made lots of changes along the way when people said, it's too many hours. And I would say, well, is that a justification?
Mm-hmm.
And they would have to say yes. And I said, okay, what's the root thing here we're really talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's causing the too many hours? I mean, you're working 60 hours a week and everyone else is working 45 hours a week. What's
Mm-hmm.
causing you to work 60 hours a week? What can you learn from the people who are working 45 hours a week? Maybe you should go talk to them and see what they're doing differently. And that would be an example of what I would do there.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is justifying what they're doing, you have to get them to stop justifying before you can have a reasonable conversation.
Yeah, boy, that's a process. I can
Well,
even see how that would be. It's a hard process to teach that because you have to know the questions to ask.
no,
And for
you
some,
don't. You just
okay,
have to start asking questions. The thing is, you have to stop telling and start asking.
okay,
See, one of my beliefs is, I mean, one of our pillars in our company was, and it still is a pillar in the company today, is that you are the expert at your job, so act like it. So if I'm talking, like if I say, for example, I'm talking to my video editor, for me to tell my video editor what I want her to do, I need to ask her for her input on what is the best way and what the most simple way to do things, instead of me telling her I need to ask. And through the process of asking questions, she's going to discover where we want to go. But I have to be curious, and I have to be the one that's not in control. So you need a little bit of humbleness and a little bit of vulnerability in there to be willing to not be the one that's always the front of the room and always taking charge. I actually call this leading from the back. When you lead from the back, you're the person asking that great question that makes everybody stop and say, gee, I never thought of that before.
Hmm. Boy, I feel like I want to write all this down. I'm so glad we're recording it. Because it's so helpful, because I have, like everybody, I have my moments of brilliance, and I have other times where I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. But whenever we talk to you and other experts like you, it's a constant aha moment of, get outside of yourself. There's other better ways to do things. And you just have to think about, you just shift your mindset. And sometimes you can have a great mindset, and then something happens and you start to get, the itty bitty crappy committee in your head, I guess.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Mindset's important, but so is action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're not, so the problem mindset is a lot of people stay in mindset and they keep thinking it's what's going to happen. If you don't take action, nothing's going to happen. So you might want to say, I've got this mindset. I'm not doing anything about it, but I've got this mindset. And where does that leave you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think most entrepreneurs, they put things into action, but if they're I also believe that mindset's important, because if you're just doing all these actions, you can burn yourself out if your mindset is wrong, because all your actions aren't like mimicking up with what you are lining up with what you want to do. Anyway, I know Brian's got a good question. I can see his face.
Well, I was wondering, I think we've already kind of dove into this, but what are the parts of a sustainable business do you usually look at when looking at a business and such?
Well, there's 4 overarching pieces. I like to make it simple.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a 5th piece, which is a result. But the 4 overarching pieces, you start with values. with clarifying statements. A values-led company is always going to outperform a company where they don't have clearly articulated values.
Mhm.
Now, clearly articulated values means you have to use the values, not just talk about them. You actually have to use them as a tool, and you have to use that as a way of you accept employees into your company, it's the way you accept suppliers into your company, and it's the way you accept your customers into your company. The next piece is you have to become operationally irrelevant in your company. And there's lots of pieces that go into becoming operationally irrelevant and things that have to happen in the company along the way. But the truth is you're never going to create a sustainable company if your company revolves around you. So what you said earlier was absolutely correct, is that you get involved in these tactical in the business sort of things. If you're not going to be strategic around your business is always going to stay small, and there's a good chance you're doing the wrong thing because you're not thinking strategically, you're only thinking tactically. And when you're doing strategic activities, those activities typically are $5,000, $10,000, maybe $50,000 per hour jobs. When you're working tactically, it's a $20 or $25 per hour job. You can hire somebody for that $20 or $25 per hour and do that $5,000 per hour job, which is a whole lot more fun. But you have to be operationally irrelevant to get there.
Yeah.
The third piece is you have to have a recurring revenue stream, which means that you have to have a methodology for systematically creating new business every year. Now, with some companies, you have contracts, so it's pretty easy to have a recurring revenue stream. Our wealth management business is great for recurring revenue because we get paid under assets under management. We don't have to go out and sell a new customer to start the business up every year. But there's a lot of businesses out there where you have to create new customers, like contractors, construction companies. So for them, they need to have a sales process that looks like is creating recurring revenue through how their sales process creates customers. Then the fourth piece is you have to systematize your business. You need to systematize your business for two reasons. Your employees want systems so they know what excellence is, and your customers want systems because they want to know what to expect. And they want to have the same thing every single time they come to your company. Now, if you do those four things well, you're then going to fill the 4 buckets of profit, which is the fifth piece of a sustainable business. And the 4 buckets of profit are you have to have enough money to have a great lifestyle. You have to have enough money to have a really good emergency fund. And those going through the coronavirus right now know about that. And the companies that have an emergency fund are going to exist and thrive. And those that don't may disappear. The third piece is you have to have enough money for a fully funded growth program. And that isn't just marketing and sales. That's also receivables and inventory and equipment if your business needs it. And the truth is no bank is going to fund 100% of that. So you need to be profitable enough to have your fully funded thing. Then finally is a fully funded retirement program. There's 28 million businesses in the United States. Maybe if we're lucky, 1 million of those businesses will do well enough to provide the owners of that business with all they need for retirement. The other 27 million, which is over 95%, like 98%, are going to have other forms of assets put aside if they ever want to stop working and leave their business. You know, when I was first getting into the financial services world, I was being trained to talk to a business owner and tell them they need to diversify because all their eggs are in one basket. I have never had a business owner buy that argument. And it's a lousy argument to start off with. The reason they do buy the argument is I do this little thing where I take out a legal pad and I show them that without a fully funded retirement plan, they don't have the chance and the opportunity to leave their business. So for most businesses, you have to pre-fund your retirement. You can't expect the business to do it by itself. So if you do those 5 things, you're going to have what I call a sustainable business, or a sale-ready business, which is a business that somebody else would want to own. But when you get a business to be sale-ready, you're not going to want to sell it because you're making too much money and having too much fun.
Yeah, that's great advice. if someone was just starting out and they wanted to get started in this way, they don't have any of this in place, what would you have them start doing? Would they do the first four and then the fifth would kind of come from that, or what would you suggest?
Well, the fifth is a result, first of all. It's not a purpose.
Right.
And, and a lot of people will say, what's the purpose of a business? And you'll hear people say to make a profit. And Peter Drucker had this right. He said, no, the purpose of a business is to create a customer. You get a profit as a result. Now, the first thing I would tell somebody who's going into business, I would say two things to them. One, get customers. Without a customer, you don't have a business. Two, realize that the amount of time you have to service your customer is half of what you thought it was. So price accordingly. So if you think you have 2,000 hours a year to service customers, you don't. You only have about 800 hours because 1,200 hours is going to be spent trying to get more customers and set up systems and hiring people and doing bookkeeping. All the stuff you got to do to run a business is not all servicing customers, especially if you're a solopreneur.
Yeah, because it always ends up being more than you think it would. And then, well, mistakes happen and glitches, whether it's a worldwide pandemic or just you hired someone and they turned out to be completely different than what you had thought that was going to be.
See, that fits under systems, is that if you're going to have a great company, you have to have great people, which means you have to have a great hiring system.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And we actually have one for that.
You do. So tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, I was reading about that. You used to have a 35% success rate with your hiring, and now it's over 85%. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, about 40 years ago, I ran into this book called Robert Half on Hiring. And Robert Half is the guy who started Robert Half Associates, which was, it may still be the world's largest headhunting firm. They place a ton of Fortune 100 CEOs. So in there, he said, look, when you hire someone, there's three things to look at. You look at can do, which is their technical skills. You look at will do. Are they willing to do the activities that will make them successful in the job? And you look at fit factors. And fit factors is what do they have to do to fit into the company? And the way I've modified that is we call that the culture section. What are your values? If you have highly articulated values with clarifying statements during the interview process, I can ask open-ended questions that are going to get you to talk about your values. And I will tell you, if you're hiring for skills and not values, you're only going to be successful a small percentage of the time. If you hire for values and you teach skills, you're going to be successful 85% of the time. And we've proved this over and over and over and over again. And by open-ended questions, like, for example, say I'm trying to find something about personal responsibility, because that's one of our values. I would say, tell me about a time at your last job where things didn't work out so well. Now, I've said nothing about personal responsibility there, have I?
Nope.
But what they're going to tell me is they're either going to tell me a story where they said, this is what I could have done to make it different, or they're going to tell me a story that says it was their fault and I didn't have anything to do with it. If only had they done this, I would have been able to do that. Now, if I get that second sort of response, they're not getting to my company no matter what happens, because I know I'm going to have an issue with them taking responsibility when a mistake happens. And we all know mistakes happen. So, it also sometimes allows you, by doing that, if I hear someone who is incredibly technically competent in a values mismatch, I'm going to have what I call a brilliant jerk in my company. And brilliant jerks are terrible because you take all your time and effort trying to make that brilliant jerk become less of a jerk so you get their brilliance. And after a zillion tries and too much effort and your company being upset, you're finally going to say, you can't work here anymore. And then you're going to have a line out your door saying, what took you so long to get rid of them?
Yeah. Yeah, I've worked in companies, the same thing. My mother owned a staffing agency for over 50 years. And everything that you're describing is, well, don't want to say old school, but it's old school in a way because it tends to move away from algorithms. And even though algorithms are used, we have personality tests and Myers-Briggs and all these other things that people can use for this. But it's amazing. One great conversation can get you, I think, more than half of the standardized tests that
Well,
are
the
out there.
testing, I mean, the testing is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk to you for a half an hour and get
Mhm.
pretty close to what your disc profile would be.
Right.
I can talk to you for a half an hour and get pretty close to what your Colby index might be.
Mm.
I love the Colby index and I love disc. I use both of them. I think they're both, good tools, but it's more important to be able to know how to ask an open-ended question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, too many people, I watch too many people do job interviews. And first of all, they don't ask questions. And second of all, they talk about their company and don't find out about the person who might be joining their company and what makes them tick.
Mm-hmm.
So my belief is HR should not be doing interviewing. My belief is we should be training our frontline supervisors how to do interviewing, so they're hiring the right people for their section, because after all, they're the ones that have to work with them.
Right.
Mm.
If HR is doing your hiring for you, HR is giving you an employee, you're not adopting an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I've read some really interesting research is that it's not so important for employee satisfaction that it's the culture of the company, but it's the culture of the team. So they have to fit into the team they're being hired for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the team hopefully is going to fit in with the culture of the company.
Mm.
And that's where senior management has to pay some attention.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that goes into that, because you have HR, which are the HR clerks, and then you have the HR strategists that are dealing with all the managers, and they understand, they have more of an eye towards the culture. And maybe the problem might be a manager that's good in some ways, not good in another, and you have to look for that. So if you're a big enough company to have that, you should listen to all of that, because it can be very layered. But for a small company, HR and the hiring manager and the person you're working with every day, that's going to be you for quite some time.
Yeah.
Until you expand. So
But
you have to really get your skill set up.
When we got to 90 employees, we still didn't have an HR department.
Mm.
Wow.
And the reason was I really feel and still feel that HR should be a distributed process.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have several hundred companies, you might want to have an HR manager who is only doing HR strategy, not HR administration. But the HR, the benefits administration, which is what most people think HR is an administrative function. It's not necessarily an HR function.
Right. Yeah, to me, that's old school. When people I talk about HR strategy a lot. I have that background. And, but then again, I would come in and do sales. I would do marketing. I would do getting in the accounting system and see how that was not being handled properly from a purchase order standpoint, and how that PO worked. So HR strategy is really the wave of the future, is having someone like that who delves into the departments and gets the culture and gets the flow, and then tries to strategize with the managers or with the owner of the company on what would actually be the correct hire. Because I spent 25 years as a crisis intervention consultant for businesses, and I would go in, everybody's on fire, and I try to put them out. And the one thing they would always say, it's my sales and marketing. It's this guy Bob's not closing, or it's this brochure. It was always an HR strategy issue. They had the wrong people in the wrong positions, paying them the wrong wages, managing them poorly. That's what was tanking the company every single time. It had nothing to do with the brochures or the website. That was like a secondary issue to that.
It's sort of like you hire a sales manager and they say, well, I can't make any sales, so I get business cards.
Yeah. Or the marketing,
really?
And you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, they wait to that. I know, and I've made that mistake. I've made bad hiring decisions on that, and man, I learned a lot. It was always like, whatever. Anyway, guys, we are talking to Josh Patrick. Josh, you've just been absolutely incredible. He's with sustainablebusiness.co. And is there anything that you can tell us about what you're doing now, or other ways people can go to you for help before we leave?
Well, I've written this ebook, which I'd be happy to have people get. It's really easy to get. If you go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/sale ready, you'll get our ebook on the 8 steps to create a sale ready company. And you really want to create a sale ready company, whether you're going to sell the company or not, And the reason is when you have a sale-ready company, you're going to be filling those 4 buckets of profit, and you'll be having a lot more fun than if you're dealing with the day-to-day tactical issues in your company, which make you get burned out. Because if you do those same things forever and ever and ever, you're going to get tired of doing it.
Yeah.
I'm also in the process of finishing my 2nd book. So it'll be out, I think, in the fall. And the working title, I think, is The Sale Ready Company, but that could change.
Writers.
That's how books go. Our publisher hasn't seen it yet, so they may have something to say about that. But we're in the final stages of editing that right now.
Okay,
Awesome.
well, thank you. Well, thank you for being with us on the show today. And Tammy, our time is at a close. We've learned so much. And so take us away and let everybody know how they can find out more about Josh and his upcoming book and this wonderful free ebook that we can get to have a sale-ready company.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again, Josh, so much for being with us. And thank you, Jennifer and Brian, for hosting today. And we will have Josh's links for his ebook and how you can find his future books and find him. If you have any questions for him, we'll have all of that in our show notes. And you can find us across all platforms. We are at Leafy Legal. And if you do have a question for the show, or you have a guest that you would just love to have on with us, just contact me. It is Tammy, Tammy, at leafylegalservices.com, and I'll get right back to you. We'd love it if you would comment and rate our show, because we always love to hear from our listeners. And thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Attention real estate investors and entrepreneurs. Did you know that real estate investors are a primary target for lawsuits? According to the National Survey of the Court data, 25% of Americans risk being sued in their lifetime. However, if you are a real estate investor, you have a 95% chance of being sued in the next 20 years. Leafy Legal Services helps you protect your assets and strategically grow your business and wealth. Leafy Legal Services are experts at the Series LLC and Delaware Statutory Trust, two of the newest and most ideal legal structures for real estate investors. Leafy Legal Services have the most personalized and affordable solutions for setting up LLCs. Property owners are always at risk when it comes to their assets. Anonymity is so important. If you own just a rental house and you own your home, you have to protect yourself and your properties from any potential legal issues. Leafy Legal Services have the right solutions to make sure you are happy and feel secure. They offer cost-effective documentation that suits their clients' needs. For a free consultation and ebook, visit leafylegalservices.com. They are waiting to hear from you. leafylegalservices.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't wait. Take action now. LeafyLegalServices.com. Protect your assets, grow your business, and manage your wealth.